Good morning. This is your daily briefing from the New York Times. Today's headlines, for Tuesday, July 28, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a full edition to get through, from the White House to the wildfires outside Madrid, from a Supreme Court showdown over mail voting to a teenager taking on the food industry, and much more. Let's begin. We lead today with President Trump and Iran. On Monday, aboard Air Force One, the president told reporters there was a good chance a new round of diplomacy with Iran could yield a breakthrough. He said, "We're talking right now. Iran took a beating over the last 14 days, and they asked us very nicely, please stop, let's meet." He warned he would quickly resume the airstrikes he paused over the weekend if talks don't produce results. But Iran quickly denied Trump's claim that it wants to talk, and gave no sign it would make concessions or speak directly with U.S. officials. This comes after 2 weeks of renewed attacks on Iran that, by the administration's own accounting, failed to achieve their goals. So the question hanging over Washington this morning is what, exactly, the president hopes to achieve this time around, and whether Tehran sees any reason to engage. Meanwhile, the president was in Michigan on Monday, telling a crowd of supporters that the affordability problems they're experiencing are vestiges of the Biden administration. He spent the better part of an hour painting a dystopian picture of what the country could look like if Democrats win competitive elections this fall. "We had the single greatest year we've ever had as a country," he said. "We're not going to let these people destroy it." He also assured supporters that negotiations over ending the war in Iran, a conflict that has sent fuel and energy prices soaring, are continuing in a friendly fashion. The event in Milford was part rally, part grievance airing, and entirely focused on the economic message the White House believes will carry Republicans through the midterms. Now let's cross the Atlantic. Madrid is booming culturally, economically, a city that has felt almost charmed in recent years. But massive wildfires raging within a short drive of the capital have provided what one headline calls a wake-up call. Jason Horowitz reports from Madrid that as the worst wildfires in Spanish history tore through the country, an acrid burning smell drifted across the city's western edge. Elena Sanchez, 54, selling beers at a kiosk on an artificial lake, pointed west toward a sunset that was the wrong color, a hazy gray blush, the fire's smoky residue, 30 miles out. The situation improved over the weekend, but the psychological impact lingers. A city that thought it had mastered its modern moment is confronting the reality that climate chaos doesn't respect urban renaissance. In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky met President Trump at the White House on Tuesday. Their relationship, by all accounts, appears stronger than ever before, even as both men face challenges at home. Zelensky, still confronting domestic fallout over sacking both his defense minister and army chief, was hoping to reboot stalled peace talks in Ukraine's war against Russia and to push for more U.S. help with weapons, particularly air defense. Analysts said it was likely the men would discuss the potential of a ceasefire and long-range airstrikes between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky also attended the funeral of Senator Lindsey Graham, a striking visual of the personal diplomacy that has come to define this phase of the war. In Yemen, the Iranian-backed Houthi militia has seized on a vulnerable moment for neighboring Saudi Arabia. After 4 years of political deadlock, the Houthis were growing increasingly frustrated. A truce had turned into a brittle stalemate, and the Houthis, feeling they had little to lose, wanted greater authority over Yemen and its oil resources. Saudi officials, for their part, had no interest in another clash. Their previous bombing campaign in Yemen had turned into a decade-long quagmire. But the Houthis have forced the issue, hoping to extract political concessions through escalation. Vivian Narim and Shuaib al-Masawa report from Riyadh and Sana'a on a conflict that few wanted but neither side seems able to avoid. And in Berlin, even before Saturday's attack, the gay community felt more and more unsafe. The parade at the center of Berlin's Pride celebration was a sunny blur of glitter and feathers, rainbow flags, and thumping techno beats, cocooned by walls of metal barricades and guarded by 2,200 police officers, up from 1,300 last year, as the city tried to curb a wave of violence. Those precautions failed. Late Saturday night, an assailant plowed a rented van into a group of revelers leaving the celebration via a side street in the city's center. Officials called it an act of Islamist terrorism. The killing rattled a community that has seen a surge in threats, including, Jim Tankersley and Philip Kalita report, from the far right. The intersection of ideologies targeting the same community has left Berlin's LGBTQ residents feeling hunted from multiple directions. Turning to the United States. In Idaho, Brian Kohberger, the criminology student convicted last year of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in their home, is seeking to abandon his guilty plea and obtain a trial. In an interview from prison with the New York Times, Kohberger, currently serving 4 life sentences, said he had filed a petition challenging his conviction, citing concerns about how the plea deal came together. "My actual innocence is my truth," he said. He blamed his guilty plea on false promises and wrong information. Mike Baker, who has covered the case from day one and is writing a book about it, reports that the petition argues Kohberger was misled into confessing to the high-profile killings. In Seattle, police are searching for a third shooter after a deadly gunfight at a food festival near the Space Needle. 3 people were killed and as many as 5 wounded, including a toddler. A 15-year-old suspect was detained and charged with 3 counts of first-degree assault. Court documents say there were at least 2 other people involved, a 19-year-old man who died at the scene, and another person whose identity is unknown. Several people began shooting at one another around 6 p.m. Sunday, sending hundreds of festival-goers scrambling. Anna Griffin and Drew Atkins report the investigation is ongoing. And in Montana, a remarkable survival story. David Cifaldi was hiking up Granite Peak, the state's tallest mountain, last week when he slipped and fell on one of his trekking poles, impaling himself. A wound nurse by training, he went into survival mode, trekking 10 miles to safety. The details are harrowing. He managed his own wound, navigated treacherous terrain, and made it out alive through a combination of medical knowledge and sheer will. In politics, a firestorm over Dr. Anthony Fauci's private diary. Private entries, released by a Republican senator, have reignited a furious debate over whether COVID-19 leaked from a lab. On January 26, 2020, when the world was just awakening to the novel coronavirus, Fauci jotted in his diary, "Now we know the market was not the source, it was the amplifier." Having said that, somewhere the virus jumped from animals to humans. Those private reflections became public this week, and Cheryl Gay Stahlberg reports they've been seized on by both sides of the origins debate. Fauci, then the government's top infectious disease expert, was musing about an open-air wet market in Wuhan. The diary's release has added fuel to a fire that has never really gone out. In Michigan, the final Democratic Senate primary debate showcased 2 wildly different ideological stances. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, a progressive former public health official, repeatedly accused Representative Haley Stevens, a moderate, of being a tool of corporate interests. She declared he would use the Senate as a stepping stone to political celebrity and wouldn't put the state's needs first. Their ideological divide was on full display, El-Sayed attacking Stevens over AIPAC-backed super PAC spending, Stevens jabbing back with an ogre reference aimed at El-Sayed's progressive purity tests. Reed J. A. Epstein reports from Washington that the debate crystallized a party still fighting over its soul. And the Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to intervene after a federal appeals court blocked key parts of an executive order restricting voting by mail. The emergency application came Monday, setting up a legal showdown as the president pushes for more control over voting ahead of the November midterms. Solicitor General D. John Sauer called the lower court ruling indefensible, asserting it imposed serious irreparable harm on the federal government. Abby Van Sickle reports from Washington that the case could reach the justices within days. In business, a stunning story from Xinjiang. After nearly 10 years carrying out Chinese government repression, including, he says, participating in the detention and indoctrination of Uyghurs, a former police officer is now seeking asylum in Germany. He says he's a victim, too, that the system he served eventually imprisoned him. The piece details the moral architecture of a police state and what happens when its functionaries become its casualties. BuzzFeed laid off more than a third of its remaining staff on Monday, roughly 180 employees across the company, including the news site HuffPost, the recipe publisher Tasty, and BuzzFeed's film and TV studio. The layoffs are part of an effort by new owner Byron Allen to stem millions of dollars in annual losses. "We've been actively managing costs for some time," an internal memo said. "Unfortunately, the elimination of certain roles is still required." Benjamin Mullen reports on the latest chapter in the long, slow unraveling of a digital media pioneer. And in Chinese AI, the startup Moonshot publicly released details of its latest model, Kimi K3, on Monday, showing the world how it was built. But in a departure for most Chinese AI firms, Moonshot indicated that people or companies wanting to use it at scale will have to secure licenses. The model sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and U.S. technology stocks this month when Moonshot said it performed some tasks as well as the best models from OpenAI and Anthropic. Megan Tobin reports from New York on a company threading the needle between sharing and profiting from its technology's popularity. In technology, a remarkable investigation: how Meta got everything it wanted in a secret Louisiana data center deal. Eli Tan and Maureen Farrell detail how the Silicon Valley giant used private talks with local officials to start a project big enough to cover nearly 6 square miles in Richland Parish. A Louisiana state legislative committee was about to consider a bill in April 2024 when the state's revenue secretary received an urgent message from Governor Jeff Landry: get the bill passed. The newly elected Republican governor had made the Meta deal a priority. The Times examination reveals a pattern of closed-door negotiations, tax breaks, and infrastructure commitments that left the company with a massive footprint and the public with little say. OpenAI is close to leasing a $500 billion data center in southern Ohio that could be among the largest of the AI boom. Maureen Farrell and Cade Metz report that chip-making giant NVIDIA is in talks to provide a $250 billion financial backstop for the project. The U.S. government is helping provide the electrical power. If it happens, it would represent a staggering concentration of compute, capital, and strategic ambition, all centered on a single company's vision of the future. And Apple has reclaimed the title of the world's most valuable public company, overtaking NVIDIA on Monday. Apple's stock finished the day up more than 1%, leading to a market valuation of $4.9 trillion. NVIDIA's stock, driven by spending concerns, was down almost 5%, at $4.8 trillion. Callie Huang reports from San Francisco that Apple's ascent was as much a result of a sell-off of NVIDIA's stock as an endorsement by investors. Apple has sat on the sidelines of the AI race for now, and that, paradoxically, may be what investors are rewarding. In New York, Mayor Zoran Mamdani's new 18-member advisory committee on the judiciary appears to have no Jewish members. Jewish lawyers' groups expressed their frustration to the mayor that his committee, which he said reflected the city it served, seemed to lack representation from a community that makes up an estimated 10% of the city's population and a significant share of its lawyers. Elizabeth Verspan, president of the Brandeis Association, said the omission was striking and concerning. Dana Rubenstein and Hirabi Nico report on a blind spot that has become a political problem. The MTA, long panned for construction overruns and delays, has a rare win to celebrate: a nearly $1 billion Metro-North Railroad project completed well under budget and 5 years ahead of schedule. Governor Kathy Hochul marked the occasion Monday. "I asked the same question, and the answer is yes," she said when asked if it was really true. Stefanos Chen reports on an agency trying to change its reputation, one on-time project at a time. And a portrait of survival in Brooklyn: Everett Green, 63, a social services worker living on $40,000 a year, considering how to afford a future he never thought he'd get after being incarcerated. The piece follows his daily calculus: rent, food, medication, the specter of unexpected expenses, and the quiet resilience of a man building a life in the margins. In arts, Paramount is betting big on a Johnny Depp comeback. A decade after allegations of domestic abuse sent Depp's Hollywood career into a downward spiral, culminating in a lurid 2022 defamation trial, Paramount Pictures is making Depp the face of its Thanksgiving offering, Ebenezer, A Christmas Carol. The Master of Misfits returns, the teaser trailer proclaims. Brooks Barnes reports from Los Angeles and San Diego on the biggest Hollywood comeback campaign in memory, and whether audiences are ready to re-embrace the star. Kat Cohen, the comedian who has built a persona on flamboyant superficiality and fame-hungry narcissism, has a new show, Kat Cohen, Broad Strokes. After recovering from a life-threatening stroke, she contends with a worse fate. In her telling, she might just be average. Jason Zeineman reviews a production that turns obliviousness into punchlines. "One of my friends said I'm too selfish to have kids, but I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm going to do what I want to do when I want to do it," and finds a comedian confronting mortality with the same performative self-absorption that made her famous. And off-Broadway, The Saviors, Bubba Wyler's new play about two altar boys at a crossroads. The Atlantic Theatre Company's main stage, a converted Gothic Revival parish hall, has been meticulously recreated as a Roman Catholic chancel. Two altar boys, 14-year-old Paul and 13-year-old Michael, handle the ephemera of the Mass, sorting bulletins and polishing brass. Helen Shaw reviews a play that includes several beautiful performances, even when the line between sweetness and treacle blurs. In books, Annie Jacobson's Biological War, a scenario, considers the potentially civilization-ending impacts of biological warfare. Dwight Garner reviews what he calls a dad book: military history, CIA operations, Nazi scientists, but one that's sobering in its specificity. Jacobson writes scenario-based nonfiction, and this one imagines a biological attack with the granularity of a wargame. The previous books in this vein tackled nuclear war. This one argues biology may be the more terrifying frontier, unstoppable, invisible, and increasingly within reach of non-state actors. In food, 2 recipes to carry you through the week. Alle Schlegel salumi, peach and cucumber spoon salad, as in, you'll want to spoon this 5-star salad straight into your mouth from the mixing bowl. And the secret to homemade steak frites from an American in Paris: a little care can turn the most daunting part, preparing the fries, into an effortless affair. Melissa Clark walks through the technique that transforms a bistro classic into a weeknight possibility. In science, the Sunshine Protection Act passed the House this month, promising to halt the twice-yearly changing of clocks and make daylight saving time permanent. But Lynn Peoples reports the trade-off: much later winter sunrises across much of the U.S. Scientists have documented consequences for public health and the economy: circadian disruption, increased seasonal depression, higher energy usage and dark mornings. A competing House measure would lock the clock on standard time. Lawmakers are caught between an unpopular ritual and a biological reality: human bodies are tuned to the sun, not the clock. In wellness, Sasha Brown Worsham writes about looksmaxing in midlife, the pursuit of sharper jawlines through tongue posture and other, more dangerous tricks. When you're older than your mother was when she died, she writes, every gray hair and line cuts deep. It's a personal essay about grief disguised as a beauty trend, about the moment you realize you've outlived your parent and the mirror becomes a countdown. And for those looking for practical movement, a 20-minute agility ladder workout to stay agile as you age: no equipment beyond tape on the floor, just patterns that challenge coordination and balance. In travel, Jenna Schnur on how to keep a travel journal. There's no one perfect way or reason to keep a travel journal. But no matter how or why you do it, future you will probably be happy you did. She offers tips on lowering the barrier to entry and staying organized: write badly, write briefly, include the mundane. Even bad days make for terrific dinner party stories later. And Stephanie Rosenblum visits 5 new hotels in vintage buildings, from a restored warehouse in Seattle to a former prison in Nara, Japan. A post office in Bend, Oregon, with United States Post Office still in gold leaf across its facade. A Meiji-era prison reimagined as a luxury hotel. These renovated buildings offer glimpses into the past while encouraging you to enjoy their cities as they exist today. In real estate, 3 New York stories. A woman got an apartment in Queens thanks to a benevolent aunt. Her longtime dream to live in New York made possible through family generosity, with a 6-month deadline to find a job and keep the dream going. A creative couple bought a piece of old New York in the Hotel d'Artistes and gave it a contemporary spin. And Adam Driver sold his Brooklyn loft-style condo and reportedly bought 3 units nearby, while Helen Mirren relisted her Los Angeles estate. The market moves in mysterious ways, even for the famous. In fashion and style, statement shades are the accessory of the moment. Laura Regensdorf offers a quiz to find the sunglasses that best suit your personality: aviators for hotshot confidence, oversized tortoise for bicoastal literary energy, cat eyes and bulkier wraparounds as armor for a formidable magazine editor. Meanwhile, cinephiles are trekking to AMC Lincoln Square, the largest IMAX 70mm screen in the United States, for 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. screenings of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Demand is so high the theater added shows, and audiences keep coming. Alexander Nazarian describes a pilgrimage, not just a movie outing. And Vanessa Friedman tackles the eternal question: what does semi-formal mean today? It's the middle ground of dress codes, the DMZ of fashion, she writes. It sounds good in theory, but in practical terms causes more angst than anyone might have imagined. In obituaries, we remember 2 giants. Bill McLaughlin, composer, conductor, and public radio host, died July 21 at 82. His programs St. Paul's Sunday and Exploring Music were, at their height, listened to by hundreds of thousands of people a week. He almost single-handedly kept alive a sophisticated approach to music appreciation, said pianist Paul Orgel. His range of musical enthusiasms was enormous, his manner was straightforward and inviting. And Bitai Sar, the artist who upended black stereotypes through assemblage, working with dolls, family photographs, fabric scraps, and found objects, died at 99. She became a leading figure in an art form that turned the discarded into the devotional, the personal into the political. In the magazine, Colson Whitehead's Harlem trilogy turns away from the pessimism of his recent novels to offer a more hopeful vision for Black history. The piece explores how a novelist of the American past recovered his faith in its future. And finally, the opinion section, 6 pieces that map the arguments of the moment. Michelle Goldberg argues Trump is beatable if you take a page from his playbook and flood the zone with opposition, a setback for the MAGA media takeover. Debbie Millman, in a guest essay, suggests we should treat AI like Kabbalah: wait until you're 40, when you've developed the inner ballast to withstand what you might encounter. Another guest essay profiles a teenager who took on a $10 trillion industry, the food industry, and might make us all healthier in the process. Lauren Brooke Eisen warns that privatization will make ICE detention worse, detailing how a Virginia county's opposition stopped a warehouse conversion. Jeffrey Toobin plays the macabre parlor game. What's the worst thing Trump can do in the midterms? He could accomplish on January 3, 2027, what he failed to do on January 6, 2021. The editorial board argues the US is still winning the AI race, but Trump could blow it. America has produced its own kind of Sputnik. We should not squander it. And Jennifer Kavanaugh describes a historic shift underway in Asia, countries starting to shoulder more of the burden of their own defense, drawing closer in a new security architecture as China extends maritime patrols and test fires submarine-launched ballistic missiles. That's your briefing for Tuesday, July 28, 2026. We'll be back tomorrow with the next edition of today's headlines from the New York Times. Have a good day.